Right now, yeah, I think it is recording. So, Dr. Waddington, whenever you want, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Greetings to everyone from Catalonia. Thanks to the Elinet team for all the great work that you're doing and for inviting me to present today. Thanks in particular to Dr. Nicola Galloway for inviting me to present this presentation. And thank you very much to Paolo Delogu. I hope I've pronounced that correctly, for all the organization of this event. Just to introduce myself very briefly, I'm a lecturer and researcher at the University of Girona. My main line of research and teaching, actually, in fact, focuses on early years teacher education with a specific focus on questions of foreign language learner identity and teacher identity. But today, I'm actually talking to you in my role as coordinator of a teaching innovation network at the University of Girona, as you can see from the title of the presentation. What I'm going to do, my plan for this seminar is to introduce you to this Teaching Innovation Network, tell you about its main objectives, and I want to focus in particular on a particular line of action that we carried out. This kind of began as a professional development initiative, sharing experiences. And it sort of developed into an experience which prompted us to create a handbook for EMI teachers at our university, which we hope which we will make accessible, and we hope will also be useful to teachers at any other university in any other setting. So that's the plan. Just to give you some context to begin with. Just to say that we're now, I think it was last year that we celebrated our 30th year as a university. So we are now at a stage where we're kind of a medium-sized university with 15,500 students, around 1,500 faculty staff. Teaching at different faculties across the city in different campuses in Girona. But where is Girona? Let's have a look. It's it's in Catalonia, which is an autonomous community in the northeast of Spain. You can see here that we're also bordering with France, and because of this, this geographical context, the languages that are spoken here are varied. We have the main language of instruction in the university is Catalan. Spanish is also used as a language in some subject areas. And English provision has been growing steadily over recent years due to internationalization. Very many students come to us from international programs, particularly Erasmus programs. So this has had an impact. Obviously, the need to have a lingua franca as a means of communication has kind of been partly the reason for this increase in the number of classes delivered in English. But also there is a drive to deliver part of our study programs in English, in a kind of a drive as well to increase the perspectives of students in their respective fields. Sorry. So that's the context that we're talking about here. Okay. Well, let me just talk briefly then about this network that I'm talking about, okay? Founded in 2020, which most of you will remember was in the middle of the pandemic, which made the first year of founding this network quite a challenge, but we managed, as we all did, through that period. The network was supported by the university's Institute of Education Sciences, which I have to say because this institute was very supportive. It actively promotes the formation of different innovation networks, focusing on very different areas. So ours is one of these different networks. And it grew, as all the other networks has, or was founded in response to institutional interests. Yeah, this concern that English was being implemented more, but perhaps it wasn't being done in the best way, perhaps. And also needs, interests of teachers and students. Okay, so in a sense, it's got institutional support, but it's also quite a grassroots movement, as I'll explain now. So faculty staff responded to kind of an initial call, and they responded to kind of an invitation to join the network, based on their own experiences as EMI, EME teachers. Most of them, so as content teachers, most of them had no previous experience at all researching any questions related to language teaching or linguistics or anything in that area. They came with their own interest, and they came from their own experiences and concerns sometimes about their own practice. So we're talking here about researchers, professors in areas as diverse as biology, statistics, nursing, engineering, and so on. Membership has fluctuated over the last 3 years, but every year we have like a steady core of around 12 very active members of the network. So, yeah, talking about when we started, the first meetings were essentially, or they had to be online. And so that's when we really established the network, started getting to know each other, and started to also establish our working plan, our action plan. And before we did that, I have very fond memories of our first debate as a network of people who didn't really know each other. Because we had been presented with the idea of setting up a network on EMI, we also started to debate, because I probably threw into the mix the concept of EME, or the term EME, and we debated, well, what do we want our network to be called? This was interesting because it started all kinds of debates about what was meant by English medium instruction, or what was meant by English medium education. And yeah, those debates were interesting and allowed us to exchange ideas about what we actually thought we were doing. And as a result, EME won the vote for 2 reasons, I would say. One, because, as I said, members were talking really from experience and quite intuitively. Intuitively, they preferred the term that included education, because they thought that they were more comfortable with that. They were a little bit uncomfortable with the emphasis on instruction. So, so we decided for that reason on EME, but also there was another reason, and that was very much related to, well, we actually used the glossary term included in Nicola Galloway's literature review, and we found several instances where EME was associated more with the multilingual nature of EME or EMI. And this was also something that resonated very, very strongly for us in the context that we're in, which I'll talk about later, where shifting between languages is very often something which does happen, but I'll talk about that later. So that was how we began. We began debating these terms. And once founded, as I said, we needed to establish a plan of action. So we agreed on some key objectives that we wanted to try to achieve over the next few years. Many of them I haven't got time to talk about, but during this seminar, what I want to do is focus mainly on the second objective, sharing our own experiences, and to talk about how a structured professional development initiative provided the basis for identifying student and lecturers' needs, and also linking in with the final point for beginning to disseminate some initial results of our own findings, both within and beyond the university. So those were the objectives, okay? And as I said, having contextualized this, having contextualized our network very briefly, I'm now going to focus on the professional development initiative. For this initiative, we created a very structured format for members to present their own experiences. And at regular intervals, we had meetings monthly, at least once a month. And during those meetings, we'd have at least 2 presentations. So the members would present following, as I said, a very structured format, where the aim was to share their EMI teaching experiences, highlighting notable findings for them, what stood out as important for them, any difficulties they had encountered, and any lessons learned from these experiences. We had 10 presentations from 5 male, 5 female faculty members. They gave perspectives from diverse areas of academic expertise and from different faculties. As we can see here, this gave us a very varied, it captured different experiences and perspectives from the faculties of education and psychology, where I am, from sciences, from law, nursing, etc., etc. So it gave us a very varied picture, quite an extensive picture of what was happening around the university. Okay, so for us, this gave us quite a lot of insight. The presentations were followed by questions and answers, debates, discussions, which were all duly noted. And what it did, it helped us to see how other English medium teachers were coping with some of the challenges that inevitably emerge in these contexts. So we heard about modules where attendance was compulsory and the students had no choice about the language. It was 100% in English, and there was no kind of choice there. We also heard about other contexts. For example, this one, which is from the nursing degree, a problem-based learning module, where interestingly the groups were optional. It was a first-year module, and because of the large cohort of students, there were different groups. And there were different language groups, and students could opt onto those. They could enroll according to their own interest. Interestingly, because we thought that might prove to dissuade them, but it didn't. There were always year on year sizable groups of voluntary students in these English optional groups. So all in all, this gave us a I've just put 3 examples here, but all in all, we had a very interesting picture of what was happening across the university. And after completing this series of presentations, which took us several months to deliver the presentations and discuss them, after doing this, we started to realize that we were already gathering really interesting experiences, which were providing key insights that we thought were worth sharing outside of our own network with the larger community, first of all at our own university, and then possibly beyond. So realizing this, we decided to analyze all of these experiences thoroughly, applying a qualitative thematic analysis procedure, which I'll outline for you briefly here. So, bearing in mind, it's important to stress this, bearing in mind that most members of the network, as I said at the beginning, they didn't have experience in researching in linguistics or in language in general. Neither did they have much experience in qualitative data analysis methods. Most of them were more accustomed to quantitative research methods within their own scientific research. This was important because it could have posed quite a challenge, but we found a way to deal with this by, as I said, following a very systematic process. And in the beginning of it, we started in a very open way by collecting ideas on a Padlet. I'm not sure if we were still virtual at this stage or not, actually. Yes, I think we probably were. So it also fit with the virtual environment. But we started off by adding our initial ideas about what themes had emerged during the presentations to this Padlet, part of which you can see here on the screen. So this helped to make the initial process very participative, because it included everyone's ideas here and everyone's observations, and captured them in these categories that started to emerge. After doing this, we passed to a more structured phase where we refined and refined and refined some of these initial ideas, and we started to identify key overarching themes and their corresponding sub-themes. So regarding the first one, for example, we found that there was wide recognition. Everybody had mentioned that they thought it was connected somehow to the internationalization of higher education. Yeah, they thought that they're giving classes and the university promoting more classes in English was connected to internationalization. However, there was a lot less certainty about what our institutional goals were. And this emerged several times. So this became, this we thought was important to identify this particular sub-theme. And for the other themes, you can see here this whole range of different overarching themes. Question of assessment emerged many times. A lot of concerns about assessment methods and criteria. Even the question of should English be compulsory in assessment procedures. So with this, having identified these main themes and sub-themes, we then carried out an in-depth analysis of each of the presentations. Now, this was done firstly individually, so different individual members were assigned different presentations. but they were also assigned someone else to work with. So they started doing it, but then they met up in pairs. And this was important in order to, to increase reliability, to assuage doubts as well in terms of, what exactly they were doing, because we were following the same procedure, all of us. And as we can see in this example, how we went about this, we analyzed each of the slides from the different presentations, coding them according to what we were identifying here. So for example, in this slide, the first item or bullet point mentioned by the presenter was whether students were actually prepared for university. Now, this opened quite a lot of debate, but we decided in this analysis that it was way beyond the scope of our focus, our present study. So we discarded that one, whereas these two items, student preparedness for EMI or language level, could be an indicator or an advantage. Yes, this one was definitely relevant, and so it was coded and included here under the sub-theme of student competence, EME students, and so on. Yeah, all sorts of questions that emerged were organized and themed and coded by each working pair. What this resulted in was we had here an analysis of all of the 10 presentations presented, and we moved on to a final phase in which the focus this time was on the themes. Okay, so we really started to analyze in depth the themes. Individual members collated data from each presentation, and they presented to us, to the whole group, an overview of the theme, which we then discussed and debated again together. An example would be this one, which is which was collated by the member who focused on EME teachers. And in the side column, we can see that here we're looking in particular at teacher competence in English language. So there were different citations, different excerpts from the presentations, which this presenter categorized again into different items. This idea that the teacher's feeling that their level of English is not enough emerged at different times. And here we have specific citations which help us to refer back to the presentations. Or this one, some students' level of English is better than mine, is better than that of the teachers. So as this person said, a feeling that sometimes they have a better English level than me, which clearly caused this teacher some concern, as we'll talk about later. Okay. But yes, you can see here, this is just one example of this kind of analysis, identifying the themes, exploring them in detail, and looking exactly at how they were mentioned, they were discussed in the different presentations. After carrying out this pretty exhaustive analysis, we began writing up, first thinking about structuring, organizing, and then writing up the handbook. The handbook aims to be accessible. It aims to be useful for teachers, and therefore it's structured in a very deliberate way, which means that teachers can dip into it. They can go directly to the theme. If they're most concerned about assessment methods, then they can dip straight into that and read about that. If they're concerned about questions about teacher identity, they can dip into that section and explore that. So there was, it was engineered in that sense to be accessible. We know that teachers, all of us, have little time sometimes, but lots of, we still want to find out, but sometimes time is limited. So it aims to be accessible. It makes connections as well. We go beyond a mere description of our own discussions, experiences. And in the handbook, we connect with, we engage with current literature on all of the different issues that are explored. Okay, so it does that quite deliberately. In terms of in terms of the handbook, I'll just give you some kind of more information about of what it focuses on in particular. As I said in the first instance, the handbook was thought about. It was created as a response to a need for EMI teachers at our own university, at the University of Girona. Especially for those teachers who might be starting out or who might have found themselves teaching English sometimes sometimes almost accidentally, we could say, and might be facing difficulties. And while there are many, many teachers who are really confident in their work, and they might just want to dip in and focus on something, as I said before, to improve their practice further, it does have to be said that there are many other cases, as we found in our own study, and as we also, probably everybody listening also knows, that this is the case in many other contexts across the globe, as has been explored, exposed in much of the recent literature and not so recent on these different issues. So as one of our initial members highlighted, saying, I accepted what for me was a challenge, but I didn't exactly know what I'd said yes to, didn't really know what I was getting into. And I think this probably resonates with many other EMI teachers out there. And we thought that this was something, well, our reflections from the beginning showed us that this was something that really did need to be addressed. I was saying earlier, just before we began recording in discussions previously, that I'm a little bit tired this morning because I finished classes yesterday, which were 4-hour-long classes, the first class of an MA class, where I actually am called on to give the classes in Catalan. So I empathize very much with this comment here. No matter how confident we feel in the language, delivering languages in another language is a challenge, and it is an increased emotional labor, in a sense, no matter how confident we are. So I think in the handbook, we do make a specific contribution to questions related to teacher identity. I think we talk about teacher well-being, because all of these questions force us to think about the well-being of teachers and how different issues that impact their well-being also impact their self-efficacy, their performance, their work, and also clearly their own lives. Not to mention the effect that all of that has on their students, their students and their classes. So they're crucial issues which need to be explored. The concept of imposter syndrome emerged spontaneously in our discussions within our group. the idea that they felt that they were perhaps not really supposed to be doing what they were doing, or that they felt that they were imposters. When we put a name to this, when we recognize that this is a concept, that this is something that has been studied, it's very interesting to see the impact that that has, the positive impact that that has, by building awareness that this is not something that they are experiencing in their own heads, or something they're simply battling with in some kind of personal battle. Recognizing that this has been researched and that this is something that we need to acknowledge and address can have a really positive effect on teachers. And this is also very, very much related to questioning the whole idea of, this myth that the native speaker is the ideal candidate to be delivering classes in English. As I just said a moment ago, I empathize with this because I also give classes in a subject, in a language which is not my first language. But to what extent is it different when the other language is not English? I think there is an important factor here, because no matter what, I think the response from my students is usually, well, if she makes some mistakes, or she has the accent that she has, well, she's making a huge effort to speak and teach in a language which is a minoritized language, a language which is considered under some threat. What's the difference, however, when the language is the global dominant language that we know as English? I think it is different. And here, the concept of native speakerism is crucial that we explore this. And I've highlighted here, I've asterisked one of the references, because this is not included in the handbook, because this has literally just been published now. I have included it in the references of this presentation, as I think it provides us with an excellent up-to-date review, of a critical review of scholarship investigating this complex area. And I've also published in this area related to pre-service teachers, preconceptions, ideas which link, or at least I link these preconceptions about their preference for a native speaker with the low self-efficacy levels of pre-service, preschool teachers, future teachers of English. For me, over the years, this issue has become increasingly important for me. I've been working on my own book, which is specifically focused on teacher education, and explores it from different areas, including well-being, including issues related to racial linguistics, related to translanguaging. Hopefully, it should be out next year, and I will update the ELINet team when it's out there, okay, when it's published. So to start to move towards concluding this seminar, we've published a very brief taster of the issues that are covered in the handbook on our institutional website. On the website, they're here they're in English and in Catalan, because, as I said, we recognizing this bilingual context we're working in. Yeah, it's a taster, basically. We were under some pressure is not exactly the word, but we were asked to provide something already, yeah, for teachers to be able to consult. So this is a taster of the different themes that appear in the handbook. And the handbook itself is in production. We just got the first proofs through, so it's nearly there. It will be available very soon in an open access digital version. Again, I will notify the ELINet team when it's published in case they want to pass it on or in case they want to include it in that wonderful section of resources that you have on the website. And in fact, I should mention here that we've been consulting those resources for our current research action, which this time is focused on surveying all teachers in our university. So we're cross-checking the questionnaires that we've spent time developing with the ones from the bank of resources on the ELINet website. Thanks very much to Dr. Nicola Galloway for pointing us in that direction. She gave a wonderful keynote speech at our sort of inaugural one-day conference back in July, which we were very grateful for and very interested to hear about all of the work being carried out by the ELINet members. So as I said, thanks for those resources. They are helping us to it also in our work, and thanks for sharing them so generously. I think that brings me to the end here. What I've tried to do during this seminar is I've tried to outline, because it's always difficult to know exactly how exactly to focus these presentations when we're not quite sure of the members who will attend. So what I've tried to do is outline the processes that we have followed in building our own network, in case others might be considering setting up something similar in their own institutions, in their own contexts. Our own network has gone through lots of different phases. I think it's gone beyond what we expected in terms of stimulating professional development for its members, and also as a catalyst for change, especially regarding some particular issues within our own university, within our own university context. So I'd like to thank you for your interest, and I've left my contact details here in case anyone would like to contact us directly, the network, for any questions that you have. I've also left the references on the next slide in case anybody would like to consult them later. And I think I will say thank you very much, and I'd be interested to answer any of your questions or doubts, but for now I'll hand you back to Paolo. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Waddington. It's been a really interesting presentation with certain things which I was surprised. I was really surprised of some of the discussions. And just one comment, when you started at the very beginning with the first discussions that occurred about the term to use EMI or EME. It's so funny because similar discussions are in the field of global English as a lingua franca, and sometimes I'm like, how would I translate that into Italian? Like EMI and EME, that would be so difficult in Italian because the word educazione doesn't mean the same thing in Italian as in English. And I'd be like, yeah, in Italian you would be forced to use EMI, the I of instruction, because that's how you call it. And so it's so weird to me that there's always something about definition. But we could make this better. But that one was also inadequate. So, but yes, thank you so much.
Paolo, would you like
Anybody?
me to stop sharing the screen, or would you like me to keep it here in case there are any
Maybe
questions?
I think maybe some people might want to go back to a particular
Okay,
slide, so it might
I'll
be
leave it
okay to
here.
just leave it here for
Okay,
now.
okay.
I don't know if we have a comment or a question from Irene on in the chat. And yeah, we do have a question from Steve Copeland.
Paolo, could I respond to what you said actually about to
All
your
right.
comment, because I really like that comment, because when we started to debate that, what you've just said about languages, that was an issue for us because we were thinking obviously in different, we were coming at the question from different languages, but I've never actually really thought about the question so much in terms of crossing languages, and I think it's fascinating what you said there, and I think it's also really, I think it's important for us to recognize that the fact that we are drawing on different languages, and that's probably where this emphasis on the multilingual nature of what we do is so crucial, because sometimes we lose sight of that, don't we? When we just focus on the English, we lose sight of the fact that within any context, we're different people, different speakers are speaking from different conceptual frameworks, which are shaped by the languages that they speak. So I think that's a really interesting point that you've raised there. I just
At
wanted to
times,
acknowledge that.
yeah, just to add to this, yes, at times, to be honest, it happens, my first language is Italian, but at times I forget about, some things. Oh, that would sound weird in Italian, wouldn't it? Even I forget about it because I'm so
Yes,
used to only using English. But I was like,
yeah.
yeah, how would you say EME in Italian? Because yeah, you can say education, but that's a calc, because education and educazione are like false friends in Italian.
Mm,
So
mm,
it would
mm,
be a little bit. Some people would understand it, but
yeah.
especially I think maybe perhaps older people would be like, oh, what do we teach you? Politeness, because that's what
Mm.
education means in Italian, politeness.
Mm, But
But
it
yeah,
is
definitely.
an interesting point. When I have to attend coordinators meetings because of the institute that we're part of, I have to attend coordinators meetings of the different networks, and we always end up mixing because those meetings are in Catalan. And whenever I say EMI, nobody is ever sure how to say it. They say, the xarxa, which is network, MA. And so they've started to use
Right.
MA instead of
Yeah.
translating it. But yeah, I think all of these questions about translation or not translation, what other languages bring, are crucial because they add to the richness rather than eliminating it or pretending that it's not there. Yeah.
Right. I think we have a couple of questions. I think the first one was Steve Copeland. Would you like to ask your question now?
Thank you. Yes, I have about 100, so I'll try and limit it. If I may just pick up on the point you've just been discussing. Thank you, and thank you again for using EME rather than EMI. It's now the British Council's preferred term. Originally, we took it from the Duffus and Smith definition, MMOs, which is where I guess MA is a fair enough abbreviation, which was specifically for higher education. We actually now use it for all English medium education from the adult as our preferred term. So it's great to see it slowly filtering out. It's traditional to say thank you for a wonderful presentation at the end of every presentation. That was a wonderful presentation. The amount of detail in there, it's really encouraging, I think, to see a university actually getting to grips with this. The research we did for our book recently, the Future of English book, most of the feedback we got from our roundtables was that the universities basically just said, oh, EME, internationalization, in brackets, equals money. And that's it. Now, off you go teaching English. So I think the point you made about imposter syndrome in particular, I think, is such a wide one. I could go on forever. One of the issues we got when writing the chapter on EME in the book was we ended up basically just listing problems at HE level. We took actually Nicola's problematic chart and expanded on it from the book you had earlier. So am I right in thinking that basically this was a bottom-up initiative? How much did the university actually either get involved or indeed care?
Okay. Steve, thank you very much for staying with us, because I know that you said that you had other commitments. Thank you very much for your very encouraging comments and for these questions. The last one, if I take up on this last question about the how much institutional support, how much is it a grassroots, bottom-up kind of movement? It's a very, very good question. There is institutional support in the sense that every time something attracts the university's attention, the university now I'm talking in a kind of institutional, the kind of the feel of what's out there at the moment. Let's say, a few years ago, it was flipped classroom. Yeah, the flipped classroom methodology. That became the buzzword. And therefore, a network was set up in response to interest in that methodology. Or let's say there was a lot of concern in the community in general about assessment methods. Okay, let's set up a network on assessment methods. So in a sense, the university is responding to key buzzwords and also to themes that are of interest, yeah, not just themes, yeah. But in this particular case, there were discussions that were held in terms of, well, how can we set up this kind of network? I had previous discussions with a couple of vice chancellors who were very concerned about English at the university. So I was approached about coordinating it, but I was a little bit concerned about it because, as I said at the beginning, my main focus of research is teacher education, especially the early years. But how can you say no when you know that there is support for something like this and you see the need? Most other teachers I work with, you can see that there's a need there. So in the beginning, yes, there was institutional, let's say, interest. In terms of support, there is this Institute of Education Sciences, which provides like a host, provides an umbrella for the different networks. How much support? It's minimal. It's very, very minimal. It's basically down to the members. So the members who've got involved have done it purely because they're interested in improving their own practice. And then now that they've got involved and they see the potential, they want to also pass that on and carry out actions that will help other teachers in similar situations. There is, however, I'm not exactly sure how to explain this. The session is recorded. There is tension. And it is important to say that because, Steve, what you mentioned about the fact that universities are driven to internationalization because of revenue is a fact. And this creates pressures. This creates pressures on study programs, on coordinators, on deans, who have to deliver more subjects in English in order to maintain the number of international students. This creates situations where you have teachers who, as I said before, accidentally end up teaching subjects in English, which they may not have been prepared at all for. So this is one of the points that we've highlighted a lot in the handbook, not just talking about the effect on teachers and the effect on their classes, but also questioning the reasoning behind it, questioning what's happening there in universities that are doing this. When we talk about HE, it cannot, as you've already clearly stated, it cannot be simply driven by money. Universities were not established to be money-making. Sorry, I'm digressing into areas that we haven't got time to go there. But we talk about purpose. We talk about HE must be driven by a purpose. So if, and we need to feel that purpose, when we know that there is a real purpose to what we're doing, if we're changing to doing classes in English because these nurses, for example, or trainee nurses, will one day be in hospitals where they will need to communicate in English with some people, it has a purpose for them. If there is no purpose, if we're doing it to guarantee that we have these international programs, but nobody's quite sure why, then it's a problem, and it creates problems. So I think it's down to purpose, and we do talk about this at length in the introductory part of the objectives of EMI in the handbook. So Steve, I've tried to I think I've tried to respond to most of the very interesting comments and questions that you had there.
Thank you. That was both detailed and heartfelt.
Indeed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I think most of us are speaking from the heart, aren't we? Because we've been there, we've been through these things, and so it does generate these reactions.
I think Daniel Jones had raised his hand. Would you? Hello.
Actually, no, that was my question as well. And
I see.
Yeah, but actually, to push a little further on it, it was really sort of the question of you talk about catalyst for change, and there's a lot of comments I see from Nicola talking about this grassroots and it becoming change from sort of creating a community of practice. It seems it seems sort of a common theme actually in lots of contexts, EME and EMI contexts, that this is really the only response there is, and there is a sort of, how do you create a catalyst for planning change and policy change at a higher university level? It's I don't know which comes first, whether it's the planning first and then eventually it ends up as a policy, or whether actually to get someone to put down on paper what they think it should look like. And do you think this then sort of, I think that's what you're getting at, this has the capacity to feed into that conversation and create pressure for change?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, it's absolutely that. Daniel, you mentioned the chat. I've not actually seen the chat at all, so please let me know if there's anything else in there that I should have paid attention to, because I've not got it open. Yes, it's absolutely in that direction. And I think that's why I say that there is this element of tension. Yeah, in the first place, there was institutional interest in us setting up, but then we start to ask some thorny questions sometimes, or to push forward with some pretty thorny issues, and we're quite happy with that. Yeah, so we're kind of in this situation where, yeah, it's negotiating those changes as well. But to give some examples of changes, I think I mentioned when I talked about the themes, one of the themes was assessment methods, assessment criteria. There was a lot of concern about compulsory modules where we have students with, as happens everywhere, yeah, we have students with completely different levels of English language competence. It's not a requirement for them to enroll on most degree programs. However, they could find in year 2 that they suddenly have to be on a compulsory module and be assessed on work that they submit in English. Now, there's a real contradiction here, and that is, it's a contradiction. It's not fair, as the students say. Yeah, that's what they say. And therefore, when we've discussed we've discussed it in our own discussions, and we talk about this in the handbook and also at our conference that we had in July, this needs to be considered. It needs to be rethought. We cannot have top-down policy saying to us, because it says the subject's in English, you have to do everything in English and you have to assess them in English, when this clearly has a discriminatory effect on student performance. And here we've managed to make some inroad, because we are questioning that and saying, well, it depends on the context. Yeah, it depends on the context. If students have enrolled voluntarily, then okay, yeah, 100% in English. If it's not the case, there can be flexibility. There can be different methods of assessment which do not discriminate against students who, as I said, enrolled onto the program without it being said to them that there was a requirement for them to have a minimum level of English. So it's about negotiating these facts and also raising awareness of these issues among the wider community, not just those of us who might specialize in these questions, but with everyone, having really having open discussions, trying to promote as much as possible these kinds of discussions, you know, taking things that we do in the network and talking about them at faculty level, just kind of raising awareness of these different issues. And then we start to see changes and people realize that it doesn't have to be set in stone. It doesn't have to be all in English as they imagined. Okay, so that's kind of what I was referring to, you know, about the catalyst for change. Hope I've answered your questions there fully, Daniel.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, and thanks everybody for staying a little bit longer than usual. Again, we started a little bit later, but I think we can wrap this up. Thank you again. It was in spite of the lower attendance than what we had envisioned, it's been a fantastic experience. And again, this will be uploaded. In fact, I will stop recording now. Thank you again, Dr. Waddington.